Look at what's in front of you. The silence. The emptiness. This is the abyss. Do not fear it. The dragon that lives here exists to test you, not to destroy you. And every man must stand here once in his life. When you reach this place, all noise is stripped away until only truth remains. There are no distractions here, no explanations, no audience to perform for. Only you, suspended with nowhere to hide. This is the wilderness. This is where Odin dwells. This is where myth stops being metaphor and becomes instruction. When I made my first halo jump, my instructor warned me that the climb to altitude would be worse than the fall. He was right, but not because of fear alone. It was the waiting, the long ascent into thinning air, the cold pressing in, the sense of being carried higher and higher away from everything familiar. There comes a moment on that climb where there is nothing left to do, no action to take, no movement to make. You are sealed inside the aircraft watching the altimeter climb, suspended between earth and sky. The world below is gone. The jump hasn't begun yet. You are alone with the emptiness. That is the abyss. Most men never stay there. They reach for noise, distraction, explanation, anything to avoid sitting in that suspended nothingness. I couldn't. I had nowhere to go. So I stopped resisting it. I stopped trying to escape the discomfort. I let the silence do its work. And in doing that, I gained control not over fear, but over myself. When the door finally opened and the cold sky rushed in, the decision had already been made. Stepping out was not the hard part. The abyss had already been faced. The same is true here. You don't fight loneliness or silence head on. You don't rush to fill it. You sit with it long enough to see what it reveals. The abyss is a mirror. Most men spend their lives avoiding it, burying it under distraction and noise. But the man who can remain steady in the emptiness becomes difficult to shake, because he has already faced what others spend their lives running from. Today's lesson applies to every man listening. If you are complete, your task is to teach and initiate. If you are unfinished, your task is to learn and endure formation. No position exempts you from this duty. Now, I don't like the terms alpha and beta, but they are useful insofar as they point toward completion and incompletion. An alpha, as it is often imagined, does not exist in isolation. He exists on a scale, a sliding measure that shifts depending on the men around him. Sometimes he stands at the top. Sometimes he does not. But he is never beyond hierarchy itself. No man is. Even the king answers to the gods. For the sake of this discussion, let's be precise. The alpha is not better. He is complete, and the beta is not lesser. He is untested, unfinished. I speak to men, especially young men, who feel lost because they have been abandoned at great cost to Magna Europa. They were left behind for far more profitable audiences in easier markets. Yet, it is men, young men above all, who form the warband and sustain our living culture. This work is not part of the red pill economy or the self-help industry. We may pass through those worlds at times, but we do not belong to them. Our aim is not comfort, it is restoration, the rebuilding of the European tribe. In the past, when our people flourished, the balance tilted towards wholeness, and complete men were tested, refined, or removed by the world itself through hardship, duty, and consequence. Modernity disrupted that process. Industrialization, comfort, and digital life insulated men from trial. The weak were preserved, the strong restrained, and the resulting confusion allowed women and foreign men to believe they could dictate the conduct of our Koryos. They cannot. We do not seek consensus. We seek sovereignty. That said, romanticizing the past can blind us to the battlefield we now stand on. We no longer have an abundance of complete men to choose from, and that scarcity is not accidental. Our future depends on the multitude of young men who are left unfinished. They are mocked by those who profit from their despair, mislabeled and misled. In the modern world, they are called incels or nerds, terms meant to crush confidence and bury potential before it matures. We will address this more fully elsewhere, but the simple truth remains. We do not have an army of Vikings. We must build them. And we must build them from what we have. European nations filled with men who were weakened, softened, or left without guidance. The fire is still there. It only needs direction. Our myths and legends were not given to us as fantasy, but as blueprints. They remind us that greatness was never granted. It was earned through ordeal, discipline, and duty. If we are going to restore the core fabric of our tribe, the path of kings, then the completion of men must be again taken seriously. The passage from boyhood to manhood, from isolation to solitude, must be rebuilt with intent. If you wish to honor the divine, if you wish to save Magna Europa, then the warbands must return, the Mannerbun, the Koryos of old. Without men, we have nothing. So this is where we begin, by speaking to the unfinished man. Perhaps you were raised by a loving father who himself was never tested through no fault of his own, or, as increasingly common, by a mother who could nurture but not initiate you. That history explains much, but it excuses nothing. Perhaps you are already a man by the world's standards. Perhaps you have a family, a trade, a home, even a measure of wealth to call your own. You may be respected, relied upon, and outwardly stable, and still feel, in quiet moments, that something essential was never forged. That sense is not weakness, it is recognition. It is the signal that something deeper is calling for completion. Provision alone does not complete a man, and responsibility without initiation leaves something unfinished. What you are sensing is not dissatisfaction, it is purpose waiting to be claimed. That is your burden to resolve. Every generation has its trial. This one is yours. The ache of isolation, brother, I know this feeling well. The ache that settles in your chest when the world grows quiet and you begin to wonder if you've been forgotten. What you're feeling is not solitude, it is isolation, and the distinction matters. Isolation is imposed. It is what happens when a man is cut off before he is ready, by circumstance, by neglect, or by design. It is unchosen, and it often arrives without explanation or warning. In isolation, silence feels hostile, as though it were meant to accuse or diminish you. Before a man can rebuild a tribe, he must rebuild himself. And before that work can begin, he must endure this imposed silence alone. This is the point no one can reach for you. Here, the unfinished man either breaks against the abyss or begins to harden into something capable of leadership. Do not take the black pill. Despair is the enemy's weapon. The silence is not a sentence. It is a test. Refuse nihilism and choose the work. I know. Your isolation was never your choice. There are systems that benefit from your confusion. They would rather see you docile than dangerous, distracted rather than disciplined. Modernity perfected this strategy by convincing men to accept confinement and call it comfort. Recognize the design. Every man has opponents, and resistance is not a reason to stop. It is the reason you must act. Isolation is not the end state. It is the beginning. That ache you feel inside the isolation is loneliness. Loneliness is what a man feels when he is isolated but not yet at peace with himself. Isolation is external, loneliness is internal. It is the ache that arises when a man has not yet learned how to stand comfortably in his own presence. This is why loneliness can exist even in a crowded room. A man can have friends, a family, and still feel alone. Companionship cannot cure loneliness if a man does not yet respect or understand himself. Noise cannot replace meaning, and proximity cannot substitute for purpose. Loneliness is not your enemy. It is the signal. Our ancestors understood this. They recognized it in the stillness before the storm, in the charged silence between lightning and thunder. Thor does not flee that moment. He advances into it. As the storm draws closer, the silence shortens, the pressure builds, and there is no choice left but to stand and meet what is coming. What you are feeling is not abandonment. It is the summons to strength. It tells you, in this moment, that you have not yet completed the work of becoming your own ally. When faced instead of escaped, loneliness becomes pressure. It pushes a man inward until he either collapses or integrates. And when integration begins, something changes. The silence loses its hostility. Loneliness loosens its grip. What once felt like exile prepares to become something else. Solitude is not the absence of others. It is the presence of oneself. Solitude begins only after isolation and loneliness have been faced and mastered. It is what remains when a man no longer fears his own company, when silence stops accusing him and begins to steady him. This is where self-growth actually starts. I know this distinction because I lived it. There was a time when I hated being alone. Silence felt heavy then, so I filled it with noise, movement, drugs, and distraction. I did not yet respect the man I was becoming, and being alone with him felt like punishment. That changed only after the work was done. After trial, discipline, failure, and correction. After I accepted responsibility for becoming better. When that happened, the silence stopped pressing against me, and it began to hold me upright. Now, I guard my solitude fiercely. I seek it not to escape the world, but to return to myself. Solitude is where I sharpen my thoughts, examine my actions, and realign my will. It is where I commune with who I am and with the gods. This is the difference you must understand. Isolation weakens the unfinished man. Solitude strengthens the formed one. Solitude is not withdrawal. It is not antisocial. It is not hiding. It is chosen stillness. The mark of a man who no longer dissolves in silence and can be trusted to act with clarity when the noise returns. A man who has learned solitude is never truly alone. He carries himself with himself, and that is enough. This silence is the space between who you were and who you are becoming. At first, it feels like punishment. It isn't. It is an audit. Most men rush to fill it with distraction, drugs, porn, noises, excuses, anything to avoid the dragon. But if you remain still, the fog begins to lift, false comforts fall away. In that stillness, you hear something older than modern life allows. You hear your ancestral voice. It remembers duty, strength, honor, and truth. This is where formation truly begins. There is a rule men must understand if they wish to remain fit for leadership. A man must belong to two groups at the same time. One, where he stands as senior, where he teaches, tests, corrects, and hardens others. And one, where he stands as junior, where he is corrected, challenged, and outmatched. These roles are not sequential, they are simultaneous. And a man who abandons either breaks the chain. This is not about personal growth alone. It is about continuity. A man does not complete himself once and then retire from formation. He is formed upward and downward at the same time, receiving pressure from above while transmitting strength below. When a man chooses only the group where he leads, he interrupts the current. When he chooses only the group where he learns, he withholds responsibility. Either failure weakens the tribe. You see the decay when this rule is ignored. Men grow comfortable in spaces where they are dominant. They collect validation they no longer earn. They surround themselves with weaker men and call it leadership. They avoid arenas where they can be corrected, outperformed, or humbled. What looks like confidence is often concealment. Authority without continued testing grows brittle. Our ancestors understood this without needing to name it. Our mythology is filled with examples because the pattern was lived, not theorized. Elders still answered to councils. Kings still faced ordeal. Warriors taught those below them while submitting to those above. The manor bun was never a throne. It was a ladder, and no man stood on the highest rung alone. To stop being tested was to stop being worthy. To stop teaching was to abandon the future. So understand this clearly. If you allow yourself to exist where you are dominant or only where you are subordinate, you are already failing someone, either those above you or those below you. Every man needs trial. Without it, there is no transformation, only stagnation disguised as insight. This is why the desire for a warband arises naturally in men who are waking up. It is the correct instinct, but it comes only after self-order. Warbands are not built from chaos or yearning. They are built from men who have already submitted themselves to discipline. So, if you must go alone, then go alone. Climb if there is a mountain. Endure if there is resistance. Test yourself when there is no applause and no witness. The path of kings is called lonely not because it lacks meaning, but because few are willing to walk it without validation. This is where talk ends and practice begins, not symbols, not intentions, proof. Wake at 5 a.m. for 30 days and make your bed without exception. Submit your body to one hard physical session every other day for 6 weeks. And spend one full night alone, 24 hours, without a phone, without distraction, without escape. These acts are not rituals for show. They force discipline, solitude, and pain into habit. And habit is what reshapes a man. This is not punishment. It is preparation. What you lack is not identity, worth, or potential. What you lack is formation. And formation is built only through endurance. Isolation, when faced correctly, becomes solitude. Silence becomes a forge, and in that forge, the unfinished man begins to take shape. In time, you will understand why solitude is sacred. It is where a man learns to move without applause, to stand without permission, and to act without needing affirmation. This is where strength becomes quiet and dependable. You were never truly alone. The warband was not absent. It was waiting. Perhaps you are unfinished, and that can be changed. I know this because I was once the same boy. Not fitting in felt like failure at the time, but it was the signal piercing through the veil. Pain became the path. Transformation itself became the reward. What I once resented, I now recognize as the pressure that shaped me. This path is voluntary now, and it is precisely what makes it sacred. No one forces you to walk it. No one drags you forward. You must choose to leap. Modernity is a sinking ship. The decks are still lit, the music still plays, and many men cling to its comforts because abandoning them feels like loss. They tell themselves it is safer to stay aboard, even as the water rises around their feet. They fill their hands with what can be carried, hoping weight will save them. It will not. Those who remain will go down with it, not because they were pushed, but because they refused to move. Those who leap do so knowing the water will be cold, the swim long, and the shore uncertain. But they also know this: nothing living is built by clinging to what is already failing. No one can make that choice for you. You must step away from the wreck while there is still time. You must leave what cannot be saved, and you must do it before the noise stops and the silence returns. And when you leap, you will not find yourself alone in the water. You will see others beside you, men who recognized the same signal, who stepped away from what was failing and refused to remain unfinished. That is the war band. They are not calling you from the deck. They are already moving toward the far shore. Embrace the war band. Until next time.